The basics are hopefully set, so now it's time to dive a bit deeper into the tool. Specifically, we'll have a look at commits again, we'll learn how we can save commits internally in Git, and we'll learn how we can even get back deleted commits or branches. We'll have a look at how we can manage and combine different branches. We had a look at the merge command already in this course. We'll have a look at this again and also learn new commands to, well, do exactly such kind of operations. And while combining branches, well, conflicts may arise, so we'll have a look at how we can resolve such conflicts in Git. That's what's inside this module. Let's get started. To get started, I opened a new Visual Studio Code instance here, and I will create a new folder, a new project folder in the end, maybe called Git Deep Dive here, and we'll drag this into VS Code and maximize that, close that welcome screen, and bring back our good old panel, our terminal down here, and maybe clear this. And now, before we dive into the first command, we'll maybe create a new project file in here. Let's call it file1.txt. We stay very creative as we did it throughout this entire course. And we'll now initialize our repository with git init right here. And now we'll add this file and commit the change saying file1 added. Something like this. Nothing new here. We now have one commit in our repository and we are in the master branch, which was created automatically with our first commit. Now, I want to explore a specific command in this lecture, and this command is git stash. What is this stash? Well, let's say you have this project right here we are working on, and this is the latest commit you have. Now you keep working on this project and say, well, working on a nice feature. You typically would do this in a feature branch, I'm totally aware of that, but let's say you're now working on this feature directly in the master branch. Now you suddenly have to go back to your latest commit though. Well, what can you do? Well, you learned ways to undo unstaged changes or stage changes, but that's not what you want. You don't want to lose your progress, but you still don't want to create a new commit, because you could, of course, create a new dirty commit, so to say, then create a new branch if you want to, which then also holds this commit, and then you could reset the head of the master to jump back, so that's quite a cumbersome approach. To avoid such an approach, we have the stash. The stash is kind of an internal memory, you could say, where you can save uncommitted, unstaged changes. That's what it is. You can't just do this, then go back to the latest commit, and then simply bring back these changes whenever you want to. How does this work though? Well, if we now type git stash, this is the command right here. You see, our initial text is gone, so we are now back in our latest commit. If we check git log, you can also see this. We are here still in our only commit, nothing was added. And also if we check our branches here, you can see we only have this master branch. But if we now type git stash apply, like this, well then we suddenly have our changes back and we can now stage these changes and then also commit these if we want to. So this is what the stash basically does. The stash allows you to save unstaged changes and to access these whenever you want to do so. Now, you can also continue working now on these stashed changes. For example, let's say another awesome feature in here, this one. Let's again save this and now add it to the stash again with git stash. And as you can see, we are back in the initial state. But now we actually made two stashes, right? We added the stash command 2 times. Now where are these two versions? Well, with git stash apply, right, we only get back the latest one. We saw that already. But with git stash list here, like this, we get an overview of all our stash changes, of our stash commits, you could say, that we did. So we get this index up here, starting from 0, then, well, adding up depending on the amounts of stashes you have. And this right here on top is always the latest stash data. And you can also access these different stages via this index here. So for example, if you want to go back to our first version, so this one right here, you can simply type git stash apply, so the command we just used, and now 1. If you do so, this is not working. Why? Because you access the stash data, but now you have to, well, stage these changes and create a commit, or you have to undo these changes. Now you're back in the normal Git logic, so to say. So the approach is always to, well, have a commit, then to change something, then to stash that, and then you are back in that initial commit, in this latest status. If you then access stash data, well, you have to do something with these data. So either you stash it again, or you add the changes and commit these. So in our case, we could again stash the changes, right, to come back. What this would mean though is that if we now check our stash list, we have 3 of these stashes, and in the end 0 and 1 would be, well, the same content in the end. But now, as we are back in our latest commit, so to say, we can run git stash apply and now refer to our first stash, our oldest one, with the index of 2 down here. And if you do so, we are back here where we added this, well, working on a nice feature thing. If you want to go back now to the latest one, as you saw, if you would run git stash list and then git stash apply 0, well, this doesn't work. So we can again add it to the stash. So we have this initial one here, but then we can simply say we want to go to our stash list once again. And here we know that the index of 1 is the file which contains the latest changes. So let's run git stash apply 1 now. And with that, we are back with our another awesome feature stash. Now what you saw already is that this becomes kind of confusing, right? If we just have these index numbers here for the different stashed changes, well, we soon don't know what we actually did. The cool thing is that we can also add messages to our stashes to tell what we actually added. So for example, we can add our third feature here, save this, and now we can run git stash push. And now dash M, so for message, and now in quotation marks, our message, which is related to this dash. Here we could say third feature added, like this. If we do so, we are back in our last commit in the empty text file, but with git stash list. You can now see that we have all the previous stash data and also this last one here, third feature added. With that, we can easily identify our different data that we have in our stash. With all these stash changes here, we might also want to add one of these to our project. Let's say the last stash data here, this one, should actually become part of our project. For this, we can simply type git stash and now pop and then, well, the index number, which would be 0 here. So this simply means that we want to add this stashed commit, so to say, to our project and remove it from the stash. Let's see if this works if we do so. You see, we have these changes now in our project, and this means we now only have to run git add and then commit these changes added feature 3 to project, so to say, like this. With that, if we clear this and again check our stash list in here, you can see that this, well, stashed version of our project is deleted from the stash and it's now added to our project. We could also have used git stash apply here. With git stash apply, the data would still remain in the stash. Therefore, with git stash pop, you're actually more precise here. You delete it from the stash and you apply it to your project. If you now run git log, for example, you can of course see this commit here in the project, just as a side note here. However, we still have this other data in our stash here. If you want to delete individual entries here, you can just run git stash drop and then a specific index number, for example, the number 0 here. If you do so, and then again run git stash list, you can see that it is gone. I mean, the 0 is still there, but the latest stashed data was deleted, and therefore the initial index number 1 now became 0, and so on. And if you just want to clear the entire stash, you can just run git stash clear. And with this, if you check again your list in here, you can see you don't have any more data in your stash. So this is how the git stash works in the end. It's a really great helper if you want to save such unstaged changes, therefore definitely interesting to know.